said 100 days would fly by. But sitting here looking back at the first 100 days of Trump's return to the White House, well, it feels less like a political sprint and more like an extended fever dream with really bad production value. And somehow we're all extras in it. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's only been 100 days, too early to judge. But what if I told you those 100 days have already shown us the entire blueprint? Not of leadership, but of distraction, delusion, and self-interest disguised as public service. He called it the most successful 100 days in the history of the presidency. A bold claim, especially when you line it up next to Jefferson drafting the Declaration, Lincoln saving the Union, or FDR's New Deal rollout. But sure, if your definition of success includes meme coins, Melania documentaries, and proposing Ukraine surrender itself to Russia, maybe he's onto something. In this video, we're going to walk through the illusion and the impact. We'll break down how fantasy collided with economic reality, how working-class Americans were promised greatness and handed inflation, disrupted supply chains, and a president who appears to confuse diplomacy with reality TV deals. We'll take a hard look at how promises on immigration turned into headline-grabbing deportations of children battling cancer. Because nothing says great again like removing the most vulnerable. We'll explore the surreal moments too, from bizarre statements about ending the Ukraine war in 24 hours, to international allies quietly backing away, pretending not to know us at the global lunch table. And through all of this, we'll unravel the dangerous misunderstanding at the heart of it all. Trump's belief that leverage is something a president owns, when in fact, it's something the people give. It's not his, it's yours, mine, ours. So buckle up, because this isn't just a recap of 100 days. It's a mirror held up to a presidency that may be short on time, but long on consequences. Let's begin. You ever notice how the louder someone brags, the more likely it is they're covering something up? Trump didn't just mention his first 100 days, he declared them the greatest in presidential history. The most successful, he said without blinking. And for a moment, you almost have to admire the confidence, almost. But let's ground this in reality. He's comparing himself to Jefferson, who drafted the Declaration of Independence in less time than it now takes to edit a Trump tweet for typos. Lincoln faced a nation literally tearing itself apart and held it together. Roosevelt pushed through legislation that saved the economy during the Great Depression. That's the level he's claiming to match, with a couple of executive orders and some Fox News airtime. Now, to be fair, every president spins their accomplishments, but this is beyond spin. It's performance art. Just look at the numbers. The markets, far from booming, stumbled through volatility as global investors tried to make sense of America's new unpredictability. Consumer confidence, instead of rising, began to jitter. And Trump's approval ratings? Among the lowest ever recorded at this point in a presidency. That's not just noise, that's a signal. What strikes me most is the detachment from actual Americans. While Trump was touting imaginary wins and attacking the press, everyday people were waiting for signs of real improvement. Stable jobs, affordable groceries, security for their kids. Instead, they got posturing, meme coins, a $20 million documentary about Melania that no one asked for. And let's talk about that for a second. $20 million. You know how many community health clinics you could fund with that? How many school lunch programs? But sure, let's get a slow motion close-up of Melania blinking in Versailles lighting. That's clearly what America needed most. What worries me isn't just the delusion. It's how normalized it's become. When a leader insists that fantasy is reality and does it over and over, some people start believing it. Not because they're foolish, but because they want to believe. They're tired. They're disillusioned. They want something to work. I get that. I really do. But truth matters, even when it's inconvenient. Especially when it's inconvenient. Because if we don't call this out early, if we let inflated ego dress up as achievement, then we're not just watching a political show, we're co-writing the script. And the cost? It's not just credibility, it's trust. Now, speaking of trust, let's look at where that trust was most deeply betrayed economically. Because when Trump said he'd fix the system for the working class, well, let's just say the results speak louder than his tweets. Funny how reality never seems to care about political branding. While Trump was parading his historic success, the real world was already pushing back, and hard. No fancy speech or red hat rally could stop it. Let's start with the economy, since that's where most Americans feel the impact first. Remember the promises? Jobs will come back. Factories will reopen. America will win so much, we'll get tired of winning. Well, Wall Street didn't get the memo. By day 80 of his presidency, the Dow had dropped over 600 points in a week, responding to Trump's trade war threats with China and whispers of instability in his administration. And this wasn't just a bad week, it was a signal. Investors were uneasy, CEOs were holding back. Small business owners weren't celebrating, they were bracing. And on the legal front, it was a circus. Multiple executive orders were struck down or stalled by federal courts. One of the most chaotic, the travel ban, issued with no coordination, no clarity, and no plan. Airports became scenes of protests and confusion. Lawyers were literally sitting on the floor with their laptops, trying to defend families from being separated. That's not making America great. That's making America exhausted. And the public, they saw it. Approval ratings didn't just drop, they plummeted. By day 100, Gallup had Trump at 41%, and others placed him even lower, some into the 30s. Historically bad. No president in the modern era had numbers that low that early. And here's the thing I really want to stress. People weren't just disapproving because they didn't like him. They were disappointed. They were promised clarity, control, and a businessman's efficiency. What they got was chaos, deflection, and grievance politics. I spoke to a retired steelworker from Ohio who said something that stuck with me. He said, "I didn't vote for drama, I voted for results." And I think that sentiment resonates more than any headline. Because when a president can't deliver, no amount of media bashing or slogan shouting can fix it. The job isn't about being loud, it's about being effective. And when that effectiveness is replaced with turbulence, confusion, and empty headlines, people notice. They may not yell about it, but they feel it in their bills, their plans, their sense of stability. And that brings us to the real kicker. While everyday Americans were feeling the fallout, Trump, he was personally thriving. Let's dig into how the presidency became not just a stage, but a side hustle. Ever wonder how a man under constant investigation still finds time to make a buck? Welcome to Trump's unofficial motto. Why waste a presidency when you can monetize it? Because while the economy stumbled and the courts clashed, one thing was booming: Donald Trump's personal brand. Let's start with the surreal meme coins. Yes, we live in a timeline where a former president facing criminal charges is indirectly tied to meme-based cryptocurrencies. Trump coin isn't a joke anymore. It's real, it's trading, and it's being pumped on forums by people who think buying it is somehow patriotic. To be clear, there's no official connection between Trump and these coins, at least not on paper. But here's the catch. When your name is the product, even silence becomes complicity. The grift isn't in the launch, it's in the wink and nod. It's in letting your most loyal fans gamble real money because they think proximity to your brand equals power. And to me, that's not politics. That's exploitation dressed in red, white, and blue. Now let's talk about settlements and quiet paydays. While in office, and even more so since leaving, Trump has been involved in multiple hush-hush financial arrangements, from campaign donors quietly landing lucrative deals to foreign dignitaries staying at his hotels at suspiciously high rates. The paper trail may be complicated, but the pattern isn't. Power was leveraged for personal gain, plain and simple. I've spent time talking with folks who worked in government compliance. They say Trump's approach to conflict of interest was, well, creative. One told me he didn't just blur the lines, he erased them and drew new ones in gold. And this isn't just about luxury golf clubs or overpriced rooms. It's about trust. When a leader appears to benefit while others are hurting, it corrodes something fundamental, the belief that the system is working fairly. I've had friends, lifelong conservatives, tell me they felt duped, not because Trump was rich, but because he seemed to be getting richer while preaching to those who were getting poorer. Let's not forget the merchandise, the hats, the NFTs, the endless emails offering limited edition Trump gear, like the presidency was just a warm-up act for QVC. And here's the part that really stings. Every sale, every coin, every deal doesn't just cash in dollars. It cashes in trust. Trust is slow to build and fast to spend. And after these 100 days, the account was running dry. So what happens when a leader treats the presidency like a brand? Simple. Everything becomes a product, even history itself. Next up, let's talk about the cost of rewriting legacy, one overpriced documentary at a time. What happens when policy stops being about people and starts becoming about optics? Let me tell you the story of a little girl named Maria. She was 7 years old, had advanced bone cancer, and was receiving treatment in the United States. Her family had come here legally, seeking medical care they couldn't access back home. But during Trump's first 100 days, they got the letter. Aiz had decided her parents' visa renewal was denied. They were to leave immediately. This wasn't just a bureaucratic misstep. It was a reflection of a broader shift, a hard pivot from America the refuge to America the wall. It was the day immigration stopped being about dreams and started being about fear. I remember watching that story unfold on the news thinking, this can't be who we are. I've spoken to veterans, teachers, even small-town sheriffs, folks who voted Republican their entire lives, and they said the same thing. We wanted secure borders, not cruelty. Let's zoom out. Under Trump's early immigration directives, we saw a spike in deportations, not of criminals, but of families, of people who had lived here for decades, of DACA recipients stuck in legal limbo, unsure whether tomorrow meant school or a knock on the door. And the worst part? It was sold to the public as law and order. But the data didn't lie. Deportations of people with violent criminal records remained largely flat. Meanwhile, those with no record at all, school janitors, farm workers, caregivers, became the targets. This wasn't about national security. It was about headlines. It was about a photo op at the border, a soundbite about bad hombres, and a campaign rally chant that drowned out the nuance. And here's what hurts. The Republican Party I grew up with once prided itself on being the compassionate conservative. Bush talked about immigration as a moral issue. Reagan granted amnesty with dignity. Now it felt like empathy had left the room. One of my viewers, a retired Marine from Arizona, sent me an email last month. He wrote, I fought for a country that believed in second chances, not one that kicks a kid out in the middle of chemo. That stuck with me. Because that's not just policy failure. That's a moral one. Immigration isn't a statistic. It's names, faces, stories. And when we trade compassion for political points, we lose something we may never get back. But immigration wasn't the only area where Trump promised greatness and delivered chaos. Let's talk about faith and how it got pulled into the performance. What do you get when you mix ego, inexperience, and a Sharpie map of Eastern Europe? You get Trump's version of foreign policy, equal parts theater, confusion, and unintentional comedy. Let's start with Ukraine. During his campaign, Trump promised he'd end the war on day one. He repeated it often. I'll have it done before my coffee goes cold. Turns out it wasn't coffee that got cold. It was credibility. In his first 100 days, the grand plan emerged. Force Ukraine to give up the Donbass and Crimea and negotiate peace by handing Putin everything he wanted. I wish I were joking. This wasn't peace, it was surrender in a tuxedo. He claimed, only I can make a deal. But this wasn't a Manhattan real estate swap. This was a brutal war with real lives on the line. You don't broker peace by rewarding the aggressor and sidelining the victims. It's like telling a burglar, keep the house. You clearly worked hard to break in. And then came the Vatican visit. It should have been a quiet diplomatic moment. Instead, we got one of the most awkward photos in modern history. Trump beaming like he'd won a casino jackpot, and Pope Francis staring into the abyss like he'd just heard the Trump-Putin peace plan. Now, I want to be careful here. Faith is deeply personal, and I have too much respect to make cheap jokes about religion. But let's just say this, when your meeting with the Pope inspires more memes than prayers. Maybe it didn't go as well as you think. Trump's attempts to position himself as a global peacemaker weren't just ineffective. They made us a punchline. Allies started to distance themselves. NATO leaders whispered off camera. And while America once led with purpose, now we were being led by PowerPoint slides and photo ops. The kind where flags are hung backward and country names are misspelled. What hit hardest for many of us wasn't just the embarrassment. It was the missed opportunity. There was a global appetite for strong American leadership, especially in a time of war. But instead of showing up with clarity, Trump showed up with confusion, and the world noticed. I remember a family friend, a retired diplomat, saying to me, "We used to bring certainty to unstable regions. Now we bring drama." That line stuck with me because he wasn't being bitter. He was being honest. But diplomacy wasn't the only stage where fantasy reigned. Let's take a look at the economy next, where Trump's department store analogy made as much sense as a clearance sale on credibility. Ever feel like someone's trying to sell you a fake magic trick? Trump's version of leverage is just that, smoke and mirrors. He sold the idea that power and leverage were all about personal control, that if he made a deal, you had to take it. End of story. But here's the thing. Leverage, especially in a democracy, isn't about one man calling the shots. It's about the people. It's about the Constitution. And for all the talk of making deals, Trump missed a fundamental truth. In America, leverage isn't something a president can hoard for himself. It belongs to us. Let me explain why this matters. Think about the Constitution. It sets up a system where power isn't centralized in one office or one person. Instead, it's divided. Checks and balances. The president doesn't get to wield power unchecked. The people do, not just through elections, but through our voices, our rights, and our ability to hold leaders accountable. Yet Trump, in his 100 days, acted like he had all the cards. Take his trade war, for example. He presented it as a brilliant move, claiming that by putting tariffs on China, he was forcing them to the table. But in reality, it wasn't just China paying the price. It was American businesses. It was American consumers. It was the farmers whose crops rotted in fields because of retaliatory tariffs. Who was really holding the leverage here? And that's where the disconnect comes in. Trump believed his power came from making the biggest noise, creating chaos, and pretending like he could force a deal at any cost. But real leverage? It's about understanding that the people hold the cards. It's about the ability to work with Congress, the courts, the states, and most importantly, the people. When you forget that, you end up with policies that hurt the very people you're supposed to serve. And you make yourself look like you're out of your depth, like you're in over your head. I think this is a key point, not just in terms of policy, but in how we should view leadership. Leadership isn't about standing on a pedestal, barking orders. It's about guiding, listening, and understanding that the true strength lies with the collective power of the people. So while Trump thought leverage was something he could control, like a business deal, the reality is far different. Leverage comes from the people. We are the ones who make or break the deal. But as we all know, it's not always as simple as just playing by the rules. In the next section, action, let's take a deeper look at the economic chaos Trump left in his wake and how it's affected the American worker. So what have we learned from Trump's first 100 days? False promises, personal gain, and public confusion. It's clear that the grand vision we were sold, whether it was about the economy, immigration, or foreign policy, didn't hold up. Instead, we saw a chaotic scramble for control with little regard for the very people he was supposed to serve. From the bizarre peace proposals to the broken immigration promises, Trump's first 100 days revealed a man who thought leverage was something you could hold for yourself. But true leverage? It belongs to the people. It always has, and it always will. So here's the big question. Who's really winning here? Is it the American worker who's stuck paying the price for trade wars and failed policies? Is it the families torn apart by immigration policies that promised compassion but delivered cruelty? Or is it the man who walked away from all this, pocketing deals and making money along the way? Now, I want you to think about this for a moment. What does this mean for our future? It's easy to get caught up in the noise and the headlines, but let's not forget, we hold the power. We, the people, are the ones who decide what happens next. If there's one thing we've learned from these 100 days, it's that we can't let anyone take that power away from us. If you believe leverage belongs to you and not anyone sitting behind a desk in the Oval Office, then share this video. Let's make sure the world knows we won't be fooled again. The power is in our hands. Let's hold on to it.